morning, class, and welcome back to the Nerd Academy podcast. Hosted by our headmaster, Jared Bachman-Stubbs, you can find all of us here at the Nerd Academy podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on our website at www.thenerdacademypodcast.com. Our shows, the Nerd Academy Podcast, Knights of the Nerd Republic, and Campus Life are released weekly at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, check out our Patreon, where every donation helps to keep the lights on.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Knights of the Nerd Republic Patreon versus series. I'm going to figure out a way to say that is not as wordy. Maybe one day, maybe next month. We'll see. I am your host, Jared the Dark Jedi Bachman-Stubbs, and joining me for another lovely jaunt through the fighting pits, we have Spence the Mando Simpson.
Hello, everybody. We are absolutely thrilled to be back. It is always one of my most favorite times with Knights to record these versus shows. Honestly, they're just so much fun. There's an electricity that is like running through the body as we're getting ready for these things.
Oh yeah,
so,
they're a hoot. They're some of the most fun I've had with the whole podcasting racket. Like we said before, especially because we've been dying to do this for a very long time. Spencer, would you like to introduce our fighters this go around?
I would be proud.
Or actually, let's try to do. Let's run through the format, and then we'll do introduction and then the bios. Actually,
cool. All right, so once again, just a quick recap. If you did not join us for the first versus match, as to the format, here's more or less what it's going to be. As first of all, as far as treatment of legends goes, we are going to include it, but only as supplementary material, and only so far as it does not conflict directly with canon material that we have seen so far. So, for instance, if we're dealing with a character that we see very little of on screen, but we have a Legends book or such and such, just like story to supplement what this character thinks about, how they act, how they fight, that does not directly conflict with the canon. We are going to admit that material, but only on a supplementary basis. We're going to be sticking mostly to canon. It's definitely a case-by-case basis. Some characters need a little bit more, but others not so much. Second, we're going to be doing this kind of in a roughly classical debate format. There are two contenders. Both Jared and myself have taken one of them to research more in depth and to do the stat sheet for and stuff like that. We are not trying to push our candidate to victory, but because we have had some research bias, there will be some favoritism, but we're trying to avoid that. We're mostly trying to come to a consensus together about what we think. We will have 5 categories of attributes for each fighter. They are physical attributes, martial arts, force ability, weapons and equipment, and tactical ability / mindset. And at the end of each category, as we discuss it, we'll give a soft verdict for each one as to which contender will get the edge. And then at the end, we will do what we're going to call a theoretical fight breakdown, a non-narrative fight. Like, in theory, this is how a showdown between these two characters would go. And before we do that theoretical fight breakdown, we are going to choose a random number from 1 to 10, each one corresponding with an arena that the two of them might meet up in or would fight in. So, with that being said, let us introduce our fighters. Jared, your fighter, please.
Born on Harun Kal, Mace Windu was brought into the Jedi Order at 6 months of age by Jedi anthropologists studying the natural force powers of the Koronai people. Trained by Tra-Sa and eventually going on to train Depa Billaba, Windu was one of the most prolific Jedi of his time, developing a new branch of the seventh form of lightsaber combat, Vapad. Windu sat as second in command to Master Yoda and led the Jedi rescue of Padme Amidala, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker during the first battle of Geonosis. He also sat at the position of Jedi High General during the Clone Wars. Mace's fierce loyalty to the Jedi and the Republic came to an end when it was discovered that Chancellor Palpatine was secretly the Sith Lord Darth Sidious and had masterminded the Clone Wars. Windu was betrayed by Anakin Skywalker and murdered by Sidious, paving the way for the creation of Darth Vader and the fall of the Jedi and birth of the Galactic Empire.
And our contender. A human male born on the planet Stugin in 57 BBY, Obi-Wan Kenobi began his training as a Jedi at a very young age before becoming the Padawan of renowned Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. During the invasion of Naboo, Kenobi and his master were tasked with protecting Queen Amidala, at which time they stumbled across the alleged Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, and the return of the Sith. Kenobi would supposedly kill the Sith apprentice Maul, being granted knighthood in the Jedi Order, and begin training Skywalker as his apprentice. With the emergence of the Clone Wars, Kenobi was granted the rank of general and was an instrumental leader of the armies of the Republic, facing such opponents as Dooku, Ventress, and Grievous on multiple occasions. As the war drew to a close, General Kenobi was sent to Utapau, where he finally killed the droid General Grievous. With the issuance of Order 66, Kenobi escaped Utapau and helped warn surviving Jedi to remain in hiding. He then faced his former apprentice, the now Darth Vader, on the volcanic world of Mustafar, defeating his friend, comrade, and brother, and leaving him for dead. Kenobi spent the next few decades in exile, watching over the boy who would become a new hope for the galaxy, eventually training him in the ways of the Force and sacrificing himself in a duel with Vader aboard the Death Star to ensure the escape of the young Luke Skywalker. Obi-Wan Kenobi retained his identity in the Force after death, and often returned to give guidance and counsel to the new generation of Jedi. And with that...
That was crisp. That was good. That was
that?
That was a really good bio.
Thank you.
As far as bios go, I'm afraid you may have peaked really early into this series.
I'm afraid so, but like to be fair, we chose one of my very favorite characters in the whole franchise for me to write a bio on for the second episode, but nevertheless, I'm still excited.
We got to get Plo in here soon so that you can take another nice swing at bat. But yeah, we got Mace Windu versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, the negotiator versus the bad motherfucker. That will be the subtitle of this episode.
Well put.
No, it won't be. Joel would never allow that.
No, but I really wish it was.
They really
like that. I really wish that could be the subtitle.
The bad mother Criffer, I guess we can put it as. He's a mushroom cloud land mother Criffer.
Absolutely.
And I think I may have gotten all of my Pulp Fiction and or motherfucker jokes out of the way.
I sure hope not. I mean, there's so much content there.
See, as I said it, my brain already had another one locked and loaded for later. So I'm going to sit on that and hopefully I don't forget about it.
Okay, just for fun, let's see how many direct Pulp Fiction references or quotes we can incorporate into this episode. Because why not?
Okay. Yeah, if you're of legal drinking age, take a shot every time you make a Pulp Fiction reference.
Starting with, well, I guess you're already like 2 shots in. But anyway, with that, we are pleased to start the category breakdown for these fighters, starting with physical attributes. Jared, take it away.
Yeah, gladly. So at the time of his death, at the very end of the Clone Wars, Mace Windu was 52 years of age. He was 6'3", athletic build, again, not a very muscle-bound guy, but he also wasn't a twig. He's very tough. He can handle physical punishment like no other. Well, there's one other who we'll get to here in a minute. He's incredibly fast, able to keep pace with Sidious during their fight, which is a feat unto itself. We see Sidious outpacing Yoda and Darth Maul Very fast gentleman here. His species, the Koronai, are near human. Their only real variation is the fact that they're all born connected to the Force. They're all Force sensitive. They're on Arhun Call, and he is remarkably strong. Again, this is where we are going to... This is, again, second episode in. There is going to be a decent amount of legends in this episode. Mace does not get as much time to fight non-blaster wielding droid enemies in the Clone Wars. However, in novels like Shattered Point and in the Clone Wars micro series, we do see Mace get to show his ass a little bit more. And as we said before, the Clone Wars micro series, take those feats with a grain of salt. It is Star Wars anime, so it's basically it's what these characters can do on steroids.
It's over the top. Yeah,
it's over the top. It's overflowing, which is why it's so good. But I don't think that his force speed is beyond the realm of plausibility. I also think his ability to punch through battle droids is that out of the realm of possibility. We see Obi-Wan pry Grievous's chest sack open. So right, yeah. We've seen humans bend, Durasteel and alloys like that. So I wouldn't put it past Mace to be able to do it here. Yeah. So that's Mace on physical abilities.
These two fighters are going to be pretty plain and simple as far as physical attributes go. Obi-Wan is a human. He comes in at 5'9", so just slightly above average male height, but definitely shorter than Mace, but with an athletic build. And he has this uncanny ability to withstand a beating like possibly nothing we have seen on screen before. The number of times, especially in Clone Wars, when we either see Obi-Wan take a significant beating or get up straight up tortured sometimes is incredible. The man has an incredible ability to withstand physical abuse.
I think the only time we see him go down from a non-lethal hit, a physical blow, is when he got whipped across the conference room in the Invisible Hand at 60 miles an hour and took a metal railing straight to the cranium.
Yeah, oh yes, that hurts. In the words of pod racing commentator, what's his name? I don't care what universe you're from, that has got to hurt. So this category is going to be pretty cut and dry. What mostly it's going to come down to is the fact that, well, they're both either human or near human, and even though one of them is slightly taller than the other, Mace is 52 years of age during the Clone Wars, and Obi-Wan is almost 40. So age doesn't make that much of a difference. Their physical build is about the same. They're both able to withstand a physical beating. So it's going to be a really tight call either way.
Yeah. I think that said, the clear and decisive victor here is going to be Obi-Wan because of his magnificent hair and beard.
Absolutely. For exclusively that reason. The fact that he has hair coming out of the top of his head and out of the front is really quite impressive, given the fact that Mace has neither. And so because of this, we are going to give the decisive edge to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All joking aside, though, we do see Obi-Wan take a bit more brutal beatings in his time and handles them all better than I think just about anybody could. Not many other people can, get absolutely beaten to death the way Obi-Wan does and get back up. But as far as the hair goes, it's not even in the same ball field. It's a different sport. Take another shot.
Well placed. Excellent.
But yeah, we're going to move along into what I have a feeling will probably be the meatiest category here.
I think so. There's a lot of things to consider for the next category, which is martial arts ability. Certainly more than the rest of them. So with that, I'm going to jump right in with Obi-Wan Kenobi. First and foremost, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a master of Form 3 lightsaber combat, which specializes in defense. He is the poster child for Surisu, and because of this, his incredibly defensive ability with a saber makes him very effective against almost like basically any form of lightsaber combat for a significant portion of time. But besides this, he is also very skilled at hand-to-hand combat. He is a skilled marksman, although he always defaults to his saber if he can. But with what we saw from the box episode of the Clone Wars, which is still like, if you guys listen to our Clone Wars recap or whatever, what did we call that episode?
Retrospective.
Thank you. The box is still one of my absolute favorite episodes. And
Here.
In that episode, Obi-Wan shows his hand as a marksman with a sniper rifle. But of course, his default is always a lightsaber. So we can look not so much toward that. It's just, I put that in there mostly as just like a fun facts kind of a thing, unless for some reason there happens to be, a gun lying around and he happens to be disarmed, and and Mace also happens to be disarmed, and he has probably there's no version of this fight where Obi-Wan needs to shoot Mace at all. But, it's still
If he had
to his credit,
he could. If he had to.
To his credit, Obi-Wan could hit a pretty distant target. But his notable kills, victories, and defeats throughout the Clone Wars, he defeated Ventress Maul, Savage Opress, and Grievous on multiple occasions. Speaking toward his hand-to-hand combat ability, he held his own against Pre Vizsla, and he also has some skill at Jarkai, dual-wield lightsaber combat, and he arguably won a 2-against-1 with Darth Maul and Savage Opress. Even though it sort of ended in a draw, he arguably had the upper hand by the end of the fight, and had they not been separated, he might have taken one, if not both, of their lives. He also, this is mostly just like I came to this realization while putting these things together. Obi-Wan Kenobi has either defeated or survived a battle against every saber-wielding enemy of the Jedi in the entire Clone Wars era except Sidious. Which, given the fact that, Sidious, the only person he's crossed blades with in the entirety of the Clone Wars is Yoda, that's pretty impressive. He has either...
I think you're forgetting one other combatant whom we're also discussing in this episode.
Oh, wait. Okay. All right. Should we save it for later or bring it up now? Who did I forget?
Sidious fought Mace, too.
Oh, well, yes, of course. I forgot about that. My apologies. But, so...
the inexplicable trivia champion over here.
My apologies.
Fucking casual. Connor is ashamed of you.
I'm sorry, man.
I'm finna rat you out later. I'm gonna rat you out to Connor later.
But as a counter to that point, even though Mace has fought Sidious, he has not crossed blades with most of these people in a serious battle setting. And so in terms of sheer experience fighting saber-wielding opponents during the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan is unbeaten by almost everybody except maybe Anakin. Anakin and Obi-Wan were on the front lines of basically everything throughout. And while Mace did try his hand against Ventress and Dooku, he not nearly as many times as Obi-Wan did against those opponents. So that being said, I am going to pass the mic, the talking stick, over to Jared, who will fill us in on the marvelous world of Mace.
I like that.
Master and Mace! Master and Mace! Sorry.
So Mace Windu, one of his defining traits as a character is the fact that he is one of, if not the premier swordsman of the Jedi Order. He has skill in all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, so he can draw on all martial arts at any given moment. Yes, Obi-Wan does have skill in multiple forms. He, at the beginning of his training, he did specialize in Ataru, but his reliance on Sarisu is what gives him his level of regard. He is the creator of the variation on Form 7 known as Vapad. And because it's not incredibly relevant to this fight, seeing as Obi-Wan is not a dark side Force user, nor is he an incredibly angry type person, that's not going to be incredibly relevant, what Vapad is kind of built off of. However, Vapad's effect on Mace is important here. Mace Windu is the type of person who enjoys a good fight. It's a big part of who he is, and he realizes that does go against Jedi philosophy. And in an attempt to temper the fact that he does enjoy to cross blades, he basically devised this variation on the most ferocious and difficult to master lightsaber combat form, especially for a Jedi, by tempering his enjoyment of the combat with a conscientious effort to avoid letting it take control, but still feeding off of that amp and excitement of doing so, which is very important and very specific to him. He has been deployed into countless missions involving blaster-wielding enemies, so he is far from a green combatant. He has decades of combat experience, notable kills, victories, and feats. In Legends, he went toe-to-toe with Asajj Ventress, and basically once the fight started to get hairy, Ventress recognized that if she did not run like hell, she would die. He also, again, in Legends, went toe-to-toe with Depa Billaba once she had succumbed to the dark side. Sorry, Connor. He also went toe-to-toe with his Vapad co-creator, Sora Bulk. Again, also a Legends feat, also a Legends fight. However, in the case of Sora Bulk, Bulk was essentially, I'd say half a step under, Dooku and Mace. He wasn't quite there tactically like Mace and Dooku were. Dooku beat Sora Bulk pretty handily, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that Dooku was very quick to use his Force Lightning against him and just take him off his feet to pretty much instantly end that encounter. However, still Mace beat him head-to-head and forced Bulk into a retreat. In canon, obviously, Mace went toe-to-toe with the Night Sister Witch, Mother Talzin, and fought her off. And again, went toe-to-toe with countless mobsters and thugs across the galaxy. Very seasoned war veteran. And he also faced off against Count Dooku at one point. And he fought off Grievous during the Battle of Coruscant. Again, that one's more Legends. However, he did manage to go up against Grievous. Brief as it was, that's still a feat. Not getting killed by Grievous, breathing the same air as him is typically a death sentence.
Do the math. He has 4 of them. Most Jedi only carry 1 lightsaber. Grievous has 4. Do the math.
And arguably has bested Darth Sidious. And that is an argument unto itself as to whether or not Mace actually won that fight or if Palpatine threw it.
That constitutes an entirely separate episode of Knights. But for the sake of this episode, we will go ahead and say that
He
Mace,
didn't die in 30 seconds like the other 3 Jedi who came with him.
which in itself, now again, this is for a completely different episode. I personally disagree with the move direction-wise to make Sidious look really good by making the other 3 Jedi Masters look really bad. However, even if that fight lasted 3 times as long and Sidious, like, one by one out fenced the rest of those fighters, like, it's still an impressive feat that Mace lasted longer than any of them. So we will just go ahead and say that he did arguably best Darth Sidious, whether or not he decided. Well, just yes. Hey, I'm getting into it. We need to just cut it out. We'll just say, for the sake of this episode, he arguably bested Sidious. We're going to assume that Sidious did not throw that fight at the exact moment that Anakin was walking in. We're going to just say, because Ian McDiarmid makes really horrible fighting faces, and it just looks like Samuel L. knows what he's doing during that fight. Way more than Sidious does. We will say that Sidious bested, or that he
Sam
bested
Jackson
Sidious
just with
in
the
that fight.
very stoic scowl, and then cut to Palpatine kind of passing a kidney stone as he's trying to stab him.
Yes, absolutely.
So all that aside, Spencer, you and I agreed before we started that we have some different takes on who takes this.
We do. We did not get into it because we kind of wanted the debate to be authentic on air. But there is some contention as to who we think is going to beat the other in martial arts ability, like purely on swordsmanship. Now, Jared and I have agreed that what this comes down to is, with Obi-Wan being a master of Form 3 Surisu, he is the epitome of... He is the poster child for the perfect defensive fighting style. And given that Mace, who not only mastered Juya, but also developed the Vapad fighting style, he is, within the constraints of the Jedi Code, he is the closest you can come to a Sith, like a Fury-based offense you can get. This is a scary offense. Yes. That Mace Windu has mastered. He has come as close to the dark side without succumbing to it as arguably any Jedi has in history. And so that makes him an offensive force to be reckoned with. So what it comes down to, more or less, is the perfect offense versus the perfect defense. And this is where Jared and I start to diverge a bit. Do we just want to jump into it?
You can go first.
And then you counter?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a very out of left field backing for this claim. But when I was a freshman in college, I played on the college ultimate Frisbee team. And what I learned from the ultimate Frisbee team is that when you are on offense, when you are trying to score points, no matter, basically it boils down to this: the perfect offense will beat the perfect defense every time. And it's not so much because the defense is inherently worse, but defense is arguably inherently reactionary. And so the offense will always, if a perfect offense will always have a split-second edge over the defense, and eventually will overcome it just because it has that time. So, like, I'm thinking of it not exclusively, but just from my time in Ultimate. Like, if you break right, your opponent, your defenseman has to react to that. And if you do like a little juke and you fake him out, then you can get a split second that, like, just one stride, that's all you need on a defenseman in Ultimate to catch the Frisbee and keep going. So now It is. I will, for those of you who are screaming into a pillow over there, I will admit that there is a slight difference between ultimate frisbee and lightsaber fighting.
No.
That is yeah, okay. That's a very facetious statement. That is
Space Wizard samurai monks fighting each other with laser swords is different than throwing a disc?
Yeah, okay,
what?
yes. It may be difficult for some of you to believe, but that is the case, okay? However, I will say that whenever you are on the offensive, you control the engagement. And so in that sense, the perfect offense should, in theory, be able to overcome the perfect defense because you are controlling the engagement. Defensive fighting is still reactionary. Like, if you look at Obi-Wan in the Battle of the Heroes, a lot of what he is doing is responding to Obi-Wan's move, or to Anakin's moves, but he's still able to keep his pacing up throughout the entire fight and isn't overcome by it. But if this is a marathon fight, it is a lot more likely that eventually the split second will add up and Obi-Wan might eventually succumb. Now, Jared, your rebuttal.
What I will say to that is that I think you are right in terms of like 99.99999% of defensive fighters. However, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, okay, yes.
And the fact that and everything you said is absolutely true. And that is why this is Obi-Wan's strength, is because he's aware of the fact that him being on the defensive is going to put him on the back foot. That's exactly what he wants. And that gives him time, because the longer you are coming at him, you are giving him more and more and more opportunities for you to fuck up so that he can cleave you in two. And as far as being a reactionary fighter goes, you're absolutely right about that. And this idea that you have to react to the other person. But there comes a point with Obi-Wan's fighting style where it's not even like he's reacting to the fight. He's just it's almost like a choreographed dance. Well, like, he's not reacting to it. He just already knows it.
Where to go.
Yeah. And again, Grievous. The amount of times that he went toe-to-toe with Grievous, and in some of the most not ideal situations for him. The fight on Utapau, on paper, should have ended in Obi-Wan being over there. There should have been Kenobi bits all over that hangar.
Everywhere.
Because at that point you have put yourself on this 1 yard wide catwalk against somebody who is just progressively marching at you with the helicopters. Yeah, there's no version of that where a fighter even a hair below Obi-Wan's caliber defensively can handle that. Like, most people, the only other combatants who would be able to handle Grievous in that situation, you would need somebody like Mace or Anakin even, who are going to then press the attack and try to go after Grievous and meet him halfway and then try to overwhelm Grievous by bum rushing him in that moment. Obi-Wan let Grievous come to him in what should have been his death on paper. So you're dealing with somebody who isn't necessarily reacting so much as he's like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. And again, how does that fight go? He lets Grievous go and go and go and go and go. There's a hand. He's going. There's the other hand. And now you're down to 2 lightsabers, which is way more manageable than 4.
Yeah.
So I don't think that Obi-Wan, despite how incredible and prodigious Mace is, I don't think he can overwhelm Obi-Wan with his sword work alone. I don't think it'll be an act of bladesmanship that would end this fight in any way. That said, I don't think Obi-Wan gets the edge over Mace either. I think that Obi-Wan is going to be experiencing a level of difficulty surviving that kind of onslaught on the level of what he had to do with Grievous on Utapau.
Right. And I think given the fact that Vapad is borrowing technique from the dark side and using that passion, that aggression to gain the upper hand, these are elements of the dark side that Obi-Wan has faced before. But with those elements, when wielded by a dark side user, it is much easier to succumb to them. Whereas Obi-Wan has never faced, arguably, he's never faced a fighter that has the ability, swordsmanship wise, of a dark side user, but has the focus and restraint and control of a light side user. And so while he is familiar with the aggressive style of Vapad, I think it is still going to challenge him in the way that he's not going to be able to, throw out little one-liners and little taunts like he sometimes does in his fighting.
Yeah.
That can throw off a dark side user and make them get more aggressive and more reckless. Like Mace Windu will get more aggressive, but he will not get more reckless.
Exactly. He'll get more aggressive, but
we're dipping a little bit into tactics and mindset here. But what the heck? Let's go for it. Like it is very much a fight that Obi-Wan is and isn't familiar with at the same time.
Yeah, it's a similar fight, but it's cut from the same cloth. But he's not, you're not dealing with a dervish like Maul or pre-suit Vader. It's almost comparable to the way Dooku fights. Which granted the complete difference in style, negates the idea that Dooku can in the way that Dooku can, in a very literal way, out fence Obi-Wan.
Right.
We're at this point, this is not like the European style type fencing. This is more akin to like kendo and more, Japanese style blade work, by comparison at least. And because of that, I am more inclined to call this a draw. Because I really don't see outright, based on like blade work alone and swordsmanship alone, Mace being able to overwhelm Obi-Wan's defenses and Obi-Wan being able to completely stonewall Mace. His Mace is never going to stop and Obi-Wan is never going to break. If it's just their swords, if it's just blade to blade, lightsaber to lightsaber, I don't think one can outdo the other. I think that is where the greater equation of what is in their toolboxes comes into play and becomes very important.
It's very much a unstoppable force, immovable object sort of situation.
Yeah.
I think here's what I'll say though. Even though Obi-Wan has some familiarity with several forms, like including Ataru, and Mace has skill in all 7 of them. He's not a certified battle master, but he knows a bit of everything.
Yeah.
I think,
which is required to do Juya. Like that's the point of Juya, that you're putting everything you have under your belt in a blender.
Right.
And that's why there's no 2 Juya specialists who fight the same way. Like Maul fights differently from Sidious, fights differently from Mace, fights differently than, whatever, like Darth Krayt, whatever. Like they're all very different because it's the same philosophy and practices, but you have to base it off of your previous skill.
I think arguably if Mace is able to adjust his form fighting often enough that he could put Obi-Wan on his back foot in the sense that like, okay, what's going on here? Like, again, granted that Vapad by nature is a lot of different things put together. I think given the fact that Mace has skill in all the 7 forms, if he is able to mix it up often enough where he can maintain control. Like, it's not so often that he's like, he has no control, like he doesn't even know what he's doing before he's going to do it. But if he's able to do it often enough that Obi-Wan is kept guessing and he's unable to make those predictions, like you said, it's not so much reactionary as eventually he just knows what the other fighter is going to go for. If he's able to do it often enough that he can either delay or completely stall Obi-Wan's predictions for his fighting movements, I can potentially see I can see Obi-Wan's defense faltering if he makes the wrong prediction. If he makes the wrong assumption of what Mace is going to do, all it takes is, Obi-Wan, blocks zone 2 and Mace goes for a thrust. Like, that's all it would take if he makes the wrong move.
Yeah, and that's fair. And that is a good point. And again, this is where I keep coming back to, like, that is true of every other Surisu duelist.
Except
Obi-Wan Kenobi doesn't make those mistakes. Like, again, like, if he was ever going to make that mistake, it was going to be when 4 lightsabers came in from 4 different directions at him. And that he, in theory, should have been cut apart. But he knew exactly the angle to catch them all, redirect them. And again, like, and he's also... his style of Surisu, it's almost akin to the way Count Dooku fights, where, like, because Form 2 is not very good at tanking physically intense blows, and that Dooku is very advanced in his age as well, that a lot of that time, it's not so much I'm going to block it, it's I'm going to redirect it and keep moving around it. And a lot of that has to do with his mastery of Ataru. Is that I would argue that he is just as skilled in both. But because of how he has taken Surisu to a level unheard of, a level that, again, legends, but I think it stands. In the Revenge of the Sith novel, Mace Windu told Obi-Wan, "You're not a master of Surisu, you're the master of Surisu. Like, you are Jedi pacifism incarnate." And the fact that it is not, I'm going to block, I'm going to block, I'm going to block. It's, I'm going to move this, I'm going to keep moving. He never stops moving. And that's an Ataru principle that is so ingrained into his fighting style that man is always mobile. And that's, again, like, I have such a hard time seeing and thinking that Obi-Wan would make that kind of, like, moving in the wrong direction and now you have a blade in your chest type mistake. I could definitely see, a Shakti or a AC-10 or somebody else who is a master of those forms who relies on them making those mistakes. I don't see Obi-Wan fucking that up that large. And that's why I'm more inclined to give him an edge, because I also don't think that he can just make Mace tire himself out, because Mace doesn't tire out. Like, he's able to amp himself up. He's basically able to give himself the same kind of dark side amp that Sidious or Maul have without it being, the yellow eyes and kill, 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 kill. He doesn't go, the Jen Sarai quote, the fighting style you use if you're a total raging psycho.
Yeah.
He has the I'm not going to stop of a total raging psycho without the, foaming at the mouth that comes with that with other fighters. So while I don't see him breaking Obi-Wan, I don't see Obi-Wan making Mace run on empty either. And that is why I really think it's a draw. And, and even if Mace gets the edge, it's negligible.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I can agree to that. So excellent points made. Excellent debate had. 2 points. First of all, you may have noticed between last episode and this episode that that a good portion of our categories end in a draw. That is intentional. We are trying to find the most contentious, most debatable fights that we possibly can. Second point, if any of you thought that we had like a very serious bias going into this, just remember that for most of this category, I was defending Mace and Jared was defending Obi-Wan. So, that being said, I have to pee. So, why don't we pause for like 1 minute? I'm gonna go pee.
The consummate professional, Spence the Mando Simpson.
So sorry. I'm so sorry.
Now that the Mando is back from the refresher, and
sorry.
We agree on a draw for lightsaber combat.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right, cool. We're going to move right along into Force abilities.
You first.
All right. So as far as Force abilities are concerned, Mace Windu is gifted in telekinesis. We have seen him use that ability in many inventive ways. Again, coming back to the micro series a little bit, very clever use at one point is during the Battle of Dantooine. He used it to like cast a huge cloud of dust around him to block the photoreceptors of all the battle droids and to kind of disorient the battlefield a little bit. Clever stuff like that. Very gifted with force speed, like we said before. Very good at using force-based physical augmentation. He take basically the stereotypical like Jedi force ability loadout for the most part and just crank it up to 10. That's what you're dealing with Mace Windu. However, the one thing that is unique to Mace Windu as far as his force abilities are concerned is his use of the Shatterpoint ability. For those of you who do not know, Shatterpoint is a unique force ability, not unlike how there are some characters who are, kind of gifted with an extra ability that's not very common. In Jedi Fallen Order, Cal Kestis has psychiometry, so too does Quinlan Voss, stuff like that. How it's not a force ability that is common, nor can it really be learned. You just kind of have it or you don't have it. Shatterpoint is one of those abilities. It grants the user the ability to perceive kind of fault lines in the Force, both in a literal sense and in a more abstract. Mace can literally find the weak points of structures to break through them using Shatterpoint. He can also see the way that different individuals affect each other through that ability. For example, in the I said almost at the Force Unleashed novelization, in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Mace senses that Palpatine's Shatterpoint is Anakin, and that the Shatterpoint of the whole Clone War is Anakin. Stuff like that. So again, in a very abstract sense, he can use it, but there also is the more literal, direct, this is where I need to apply pressure to make this break. That's Mace for force ability.
So for Obi-Wan, he doesn't have as many fancy things going on. Obi-Wan Kenobi basically has one very skilled, very developed combat usage for the Force, and that is he is a highly skilled telekinetic. We see this more often in the Clone Wars TV show than we do in the movies, but there are still some instances where Obi-Wan is able to really impress with telekinesis in the movies. He has a very powerful force push and force pull, but one specific example I thought of while I was compiling our stats and our abilities was in the Clone Wars episode, season 4, episode, this has got to be like 12 or 13, the Zygerian Slavers arc. There is an instance, and this again, it harkens back to the physical abilities with Obi-Wan being able to take a beating. There's a scene with him basically just distracting this Zygerian slaver long enough for Anakin to run around and disable all the bombs that this guy has planted. And so he takes a really awful beating from this Zygerian, and then immediately, as soon as he gets like the communicate, like, hey, we got them all, he's like, all right, enough of this garbage. And he like stands up, force lifts 2 droid commandos, crushes them into little balls simultaneously, picks up his lightsaber, and is just like cool as a cucumber. And is like, so would you like to discuss the terms of surrender again? And the slaver's like, oh, well, crap. No, So I think that scene is just hilarious because it shows a very good rapport.
And the Zygerian was like, we cool? Obi-Wan's like, yeah.
Well,
Take another shot.
But also, like, Obi-Wan gets the communicate, and he's like, it certainly took him long enough this time. This guy practically beat me to a pulp. Okay, I guess now we're going to go to town. But he shows on multiple occasions very powerful force pushes against battle droids and other saber-wielding opponents, but also force pull ability.
I mean, he matched Vader's force push.
Yes.
Like, I don't...
On Mustafar,
yeah.
The two of them in that, actually, fun little side story. I showed my girlfriend Olivia Revenge of the Sith last weekend for the first time, and one of her complaints, even though Jared, you and I see this as like wow, they know themselves, like they know each other's fighting style so well that this just happened.
I'm so glad she commented on the Obi-Wan spin. I'm so glad that's a thing.
Yes. She was like, why are they just spinning? Like they weren't even fighting at one point. They were just spinning their lightsabers around. And like it goes to that point where they like are doing this flourish and they lock blades and then they try to force push each other and they're like, so they're matching their strength so well that just it's a gridlock until they both go, force pushed off in the opposite direction. But when it comes to Obi-Wan's force abilities in a fighting setting, besides the standard issue Jedi force assisted acrobatics, jumping, flips, stuff like that.
Jedi flip.
Flippy, lava. So what it comes down to with Obi-Wan is the fact that he has a very refined skill in telekinesis. It is not something that he frequently incorporates into his combat unless he is without his weapon. More often than not, he will rely on his swordsmanship than on his force ability. More so because I think in general, unless you're trying to give space, like you're trying to separate yourself from your opponent and create some space, force pushing and telekinesis is more of an offensive tactic than a defensive one. And since Obi-Wan is such a defensive fighter, he would probably only use a force push if he felt like he was on his back leg and, his opponent went up for like a double-handed, downward zone 1 strike toward the head. And he was like, okay, this is a perfect time to just like, bye-bye.
Yeah, I think the only times we've really seen Obi-Wan outright use the Force in that way was against Grievous on Utapau and as kind of like a Hail Mary against Vader. And that's real. I can't even think about a Clone Wars time where like he was like, and I'm going to sneak this in here and, just kind of force yeet you real quick.
Yeah. So while Obi-Wan has a very developed telekinetic skill set, in terms of its fighting utability, is that a word?
Utability? It is not a word.
Utility?
That's a word. That's definitely a word.
Okay. In terms of his fighting utility for such things, Obi-Wan is very unlikely to use his force ability unless he finds himself in a position where he needs to create space in the fight to take a breather, to reassess the situation. But for the most part, as a defensive fighter, he's not going to be using as much of that force ability. So I think that being said, we can give the edge.
Well, I do just want to say before we get into that, I think this is a very important point with Obi-Wan. And regardless of this, Mace still gets the edge. Obi-Wan Kenobi historically has a laughably bad telekinetic barrier and defense against force abilities.
Yes.
Like, the man can block a lightsaber for years. You hit this man with a force push, he gone. He is gonna fly like an eagle. Like, he's done. Like, he's going.
Ragdolled. That's a good point. I forgot defensively the force ability here. And I think just because Obi-Wan is so bad, Mace is just that much better, when it comes to the force barrier.
And but between Mace's, something that we've talked about before and is going to be a reoccurring theme on this show because I do think it's so important, especially with Star Wars, is raw power versus skill.
Yeah.
And the breakdown between there. Best example being the Battle of the Heroes. Anakin is incredibly powerful and relies on that power more than he relies on refined skill. Obi-Wan Kenobi is about average as far as power goes, but he has trained those, muscles, for lack of a better term, so intently that he is able to match the Chosen One in an outright telekinetic battle. Which speaks to huge potential on Obi-Wan's part as far as that skill training goes. With Mace, you have a fighter who is incredibly gifted on the raw power level, who has also refined those abilities to their zenith on a skill level as well. And that's when things get dicey. In these situations, especially for somebody like Obi-Wan, who can't hang with those kinds of force abilities. Now, not only is Mace using them skillfully, they're also incredibly overwhelming regardless of the skill. Now, couple that with Shatterpoint, that is a bad place for Obi-Wan to be in.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mace Windu gets the edge as a force wielder.
He certainly does. And with that, we move on to the least interesting category from today's versus matchup, the weapons and equipment category. Jared, what is Mace Windu's weapons and equipment, if you please?
So he has a very nice black suit, white dress shirt, black dress shoes, a killer goatee, a nice afro, a handgun, and a wallet that says "bad motherfucker" on it.
Take a shot.
Take a shot. That was very ham-fisted, but take a shot.
Yes.
I described what he wears in that movie. Take a shot.
Afro. Curly afro.
Yes. But no, all joking aside, Mace, standard Jedi robes. He has white trousers. And his electrum-plated and purple-bladed lightsaber.
Hey,
that may or may not have "bad
sick...
motherfucker" engraved on it. That is the first question I asked George Lucas if I ever meet him. I hope you know that. Is if it actually did say "bad mofo" on the lightsaber. Like I'm not going that is the first question. Because I know Sam Jackson is the kind of person who would just say that as a bit, then have people believe him, and then just never clarify that he was doing a bit. So,
but then again, here's my rebuttal for that. This is a sidebar, but let us not forget that, to my recollection, the way Sam Jackson ended up with a purple lightsaber in that movie was he went up to George and was like, "Yeah, what if Mace had a purple lightsaber?" And George was like, "All right."
Well, no, it was even better than that.
Let us also not forget that when Samuel L. went up to George Lucas and was like, "Okay, so picture this. Revenge of the Sith happens, except Mace Windu survives." And George Lucas says, deadpan serious, "I'd be okay with that." Like, we're talking about, when it comes to the relationship between Samuel L. Jackson and George Lucas, it appears that George is very suggestible. And that... So, like, when it comes to whether or not Samuel L. Jackson is telling the truth when he says he had George Lucas inscribe those words onto his lightsaber hilt, I'm inclined to believe it. Not just for the bit, but because history has proven that when Samuel L. Jackson makes a recommendation to George Lucas, for no other reason than just the shiggles, George Lucas is like, "All right, let's do it." You know?
Well, I love the behind the scenes documentary of Attack of the Clones when Sam Jackson just walks up to him. He's like, "Hey, so what are the lightsaber colors?" And like the way George Lucas answers him, this was clearly a conversation they had before, because George Lucas just goes, the Jedi typically have blue or green lightsabers, and the bad guys have red. And Samuel L. Jackson's like, what about purple? Maybe. And then like there's another clip of him like, and it's cute because Sam Jackson explained that he wanted the purple lightsaber so that during the Battle of Geonosis, at the time, his daughter, who was quite little, could find him during the battle.
Yeah,
in the sea of blue and green, there's just one purple blade just doing all kinds of business.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun sidebar for the most boring category of this matchup.
Right. We had to supplement somehow. And next, weighing in at, let me guess, 170 pounds is our next fighter by the name of Butch with a standard blue lightsaber, Jedi robes, a utility belt, and for several $1,000s, his ass goes down in the 5th. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Another ham-fisted Pulp Fiction reference.
I was waiting for the katana.
Oh my gosh, I missed it. No! A bloody nose, a wife beater, and a katana.
That is so funny. Oh my god. Butch.
Butch?
No, not on air. We're not doing that.
Okay, I'm done.
That's why I could do it, because I know it won't mess with you as much as it'll mess with me.
Quite alternately,
Nerd Academy deep lore for everybody.
And in his alternate costume, we have a Band-Aid on his nose, a Swedish leather jacket, toaster pastries in the toaster, and an Uzi with a suppressor, waiting to see who's in the bathroom. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Vincent Vega. That is just the alternate suit. That is the DLC. That's downloadable content.
That's his bonus skin. That's his bonus. That's his player 2 skin. That's his player 2 outfit.
Perfect.
Okay.
So what we're trying to say here is that there is no clear-cut advantage for weapons and equipment because they have the same exact stuff. And so just to spice this episode up, about half or 2/3 of the way through, we decided to throw in all of these very overt Pulp Fiction references. Okay. So
I thought I was going to have the most egregious Pulp Fiction rant, and I'm somehow impressed that it wasn't me. And I can hold my head high that it wasn't me.
Well, I think perhaps I've seen it more recently than you, because I just watched it like 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Man, I love that movie. Okay.
So good.
And so we're going to give a draw for weapons and equipment again because they have the exact same stuff. Finally, our last category is tactics and mindset for these two fighters. Jared, please take it away for our good friend Master and Mace.
Piss off. He is very talented at kind of taking the bull by the horns, as it were. He's very much a lead from the front, not necessarily in the Anakin Skywalker, Leroy Jenkins kind of way. But he is prone to press the attack and be the one to kind of initiate combat. The best way I can to describe it is the fact that he is very keen on not letting up on his opponent, but not in that tunnel vision kind of way that Anakin is prone to.
Yeah.
He follows Jango Fett all over the Geonosian arena. Fett's dead, baby.
Who is Fett? Fett is dead, baby. Fett is dead. Take a shot.
Take a shot. But no, he follows Jango all over the arena. He's aware of the reek coming in. He has to keep in mind all the rest of the fight going on around him. or even his fight with Sidious. Sidious wanted to move that fight onto the window ledge because he was like, I can knock you off of this. And Mace was the one who ended up putting Sidious on his ass on the window ledge. So, that's kind of where this analysis for him begins and ends. Obi-Wan's is a lot more meaty because he is a more cerebral fighter. And that's not to say that Mace is, like an idiot swinging a cudgel around.
No.
But it's very direct, and it's nowhere near as cerebral and nuanced as what Obi-Wan likes to do. So, on to you, friend.
Thank you. In general, Obi-Wan earned the title of the negotiator because his first tactic is to avoid a pitched match if possible, try to find an alternative solution than an outright battle. However, if it comes down to it, he is a very skilled swordsman and is not hesitant to take on an opponent in that way if he has to. But before he does so, he's going to, I think arguably the negotiation itself is a tactic for him to stall the engagement long enough for him to strategize. Windu. Kenobi is a very careful planner and strategist when it comes to a fight. He does not rush into things, and he often takes tactics of stalling the engagement so he can plan out, okay, this is a suitable progression of events that could work in my favor, especially since he is a highly defensive fighter. And with that, he tends to draw out the engagement long enough to find a gap in his opponent's offense, or especially in their defense, moving the fight to different settings if he can, changing the status quo a little bit, oftentimes using those transitions as an opportunity to recover. And as a defensive fighter, it can get somewhat tiresome, especially if your opponent is very aggressive like Mace is. And so being able to move the engagement and use those transitions as recovery time could be very important for Obi-Wan's fighting style. That being said, he doesn't need that, but as he takes those times to recover, he also is looking for more opportunities to outmaneuver and outsmart his opponent because, again, he's a very, very thoughtful fighter. So Obi-Wan's goal is to defend himself and outlast his opponent long enough for them to leave themselves wide open where he can make a very simple very simple move and disable them or kill them if necessary.
And not even like wide open. Like we've seen him do it with the slightest, miscalculation. Like again, with Grievous on Utapau. Like it was all a matter of that angle and just, okay, there's a hand.
Yeah.
And
it's
for somebody who calls blasters uncivilized, Obi-Wan has a little bit of a predilection to maim people. Very, very grotesquely maim people.
Unfortunately, that is the reputation that he tries to avoid, but nevertheless has accrued.
Okay, again, when you cut two people in half and, kind of make a career of cutting off one guy's hand many, many times, that tends to happen in the business of lightsaber combat. Kind of, his whole gig is cutting people apart very indiscriminately. But I think we can agree on the whole, the tactical edge will go to the negotiator.
Indeed.
And with that is all of our categories. Spencer, it's time to pick an arena.
All right. So for those of you who joined us last time, we did swap out Starkiller Base, which was the arena for the Maul versus Anakin Skywalker fight. But we will, first of all, we did swap it out for the Plasma Refinery, an arena that Obi-Wan is familiar with. It is, for those of you who are unaware of what we're talking about, on Naboo in the Duel of the Fates fight, not quite, it's between the hangar and the reactor pit. It's kind of with like all those vertical, flowy light thingies that
the plasma
yes.
towers. Yeah.
Or for the Lego Star Wars Complete Saga fans out there, it's the part of the fight where you and Qui-Gon have to stand on the little red buttons. And then, like, with each of you standing on different platforms on these little red buttons, like a platform in the middle comes up that enables you to advance to the next part of the level. That's what we're talking about.
So as far as sources for versus breakdowns, where does Lego Star Wars fall?
Oh gosh, I would say somewhere between. I would say it like on a scale of like offensively Legends material to the movies, it's somewhere between like, you know, a Dark Empire comic and like the Clone Wars micro series. I think it's like it's canon, but it is in terms of reliability, it's like right on the edge of Legends. You know,
I am legitimate. I was either expecting you to be like it's more canon than the movies, or completely blow it off.
Well, I'm thinking like in terms of general story, it's there, but like for specifics,
I mean, it's better than the prequels at least because you can't hear what the fuck they're saying.
Yeah,
so that makes it a lot easier to digest those stories.
It's better than the dialogue.
Yeah.
But I will go ahead and run down our 10 options for Arena, and then we will have our friend Siri pick a random number from 1 to 10.
It's going to be number 7. Again.
All right. Number 1, we have the carbon freezing chamber on Bespin. We have the landing pad on Utapau, the hangar bay of the Death Star, the plasma refinery on Naboo, Maz's castle on Takodana, the Geonosian arena, the tree houses on Kashyyyk, the shield generator bunker, not the open battleground from episode 6, but within the bunker itself on Endor, and penultimately Hondo's outpost on Florum, and finally Echo Base on Hoth. Without further ado, hey Siri, pick a number between 1 and 10.
A random number between 1 and 10 is 4.
4.
4.
Again. Isn't that what we got last time?
What number is the refinery?
The plasma refinery is number 4. Are you kidding me? Okay.
Well, in its defense, Siri didn't pick the last match. We used Google to pick the last match.
Okay, hold on. Would it be totally like? Would it be considered fixing the match if we did it one more time?
In my opinion, I don't think the terrain is ultimately going to determine the match.
Okay.
For the most part,
I was just kind of hoping we'd get some of the other blood. Like, I was hoping that we wouldn't get the arena that filled spot 4 2 rounds in a row.
Okay, here, we're going to try this on my side this time.
All right, let's see what you got.
Hey, Google, pick a number between 1 and 10.
Four.
What? What?
It even had like this little like rolling a ball animation.
Oh my gosh.
It's the plasma refinery.
We're going with the plasma refinery on Naboo.
We need to go to Vegas sometime.
Bro, we would make a killing out there. Holy cow.
Just bet everything on, like, you see a 4, you see a 7, bet on it every time.
Unbelievable.
That's funny.
All right,
that
ladies
is really
and gentlemen,
funny.
Our arena is the plasma refinery on Naboo. Let's get started.
So I'm going to say we're starting at like that main bridge that went into the reactor pit. I'm going to say that they start like a good 10 paces away from each other there.
All right. Okay. So, Jared, at the start of this fight, I think based on their fighting styles, it is pretty safe to assume that Obi-Wan is going to take the defensive, and Mace
Yes,
Windu
Obi-Wan is going to
immediately
reach
make
into
the
his
move.
utility belt, pull out a blaster, and just open fire.
Why didn't we cover the blaster in the weapons and equipment section? Your Honor, this evidence was not presented before both parties before it was brought before the attention of the jury. I immediately moved to have it, what's the word I'm looking for? Rejected.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn from
Withdrawn
consideration.
the evidence. We will not have a kangaroo court here. But no, so yeah, Mace is going to go onto the offensive, and like we said before, this fight is kind of the reverse of the whole Count Dooku Yoda thing. Like, clearly, this contest cannot be decided by our power in the Force, but with our skill with a lightsaber. This contest cannot be decided by their skill in the Force.
With a lightsaber.
It is completely all on the Force here. And because of that, I think that this fight is going to go on for a very long time. And
right.
I think,
especially given the different platforms of the plasma refinery, that even in the Duel of the Fates from episode 1, we saw a lot of movement there, and from platform to platform. I think if Obi-Wan utilizes, a well-timed force jump onto one of those to give himself a couple seconds of recovery, and if Mace Windu follows him there, like if he continues to use that kind of a tactic, this fight could go on a very long time.
And the thing with that is that for once in a blue moon, that tactic is going to work against Obi-Wan. Because those lulls in combat, those brief moments where they are no longer within striking distance of each other, is going to give Mace the time he needs to reach and to let the Force flow through him, to get in contact with the Force and start trying to sense for a shatter point.
Yes, and or use that lull in the combat as an opportunity for a well-timed force push. Say, halfway through a jump, Mace could take advantage of that. Now, like, Obi-Wan has recovered from a force push before, but, like, that's a long way to fall.
Yeah. Well, and again, with this terrain, and granted, like I was saying, I think regardless of the terrain, what's going to happen is eventually Mace is going to find that shatter point, and he is going to recognize the moment he breaks away from me to make me follow him, I need to hit him with everything I have. And by doing that in this arena, let's say Obi-Wan tries to backflip from one of those catwalks. Mace is going to grab a hold of him and either throw him straight down or send him like rib cage first into the edges of one of those catwalks. Either way, at that point, again, Obi-Wan can take a beating. He is an absolute goddamn tank. When you get flung like a bullet, like he's going to collapse a lung, and that's assuming that Mace doesn't like completely hit him with a force push, put him on his ass, and then use his own speed to come in and finish him off, and again, we've said before, this isn't necessarily to the death, it's to the defeat, and a lot of the time these engagements will end in death. However, I think it's completely plausible for Mace in a situation like this to incapacitate Obi-Wan and, have him in a situation where he just, feasibly can't get back to his weapon. But I think at its core, this fight ends the moment that Mace decides he is going to lash out at Obi-Wan with the Force, and Obi-Wan can't hang. At that point, like the lightsaber duel could go on forever.
But And knowing Obi-Wan, like just looking at the Battle of the Heroes fight, that is a marathon duel. And like basically every single time there is a setting change in that fight, it's because Obi-Wan decides to move it there. And, that is his mindset. He wants to keep his opponent on the edge. he is able to think through things before he makes them. And so by making that move to a different setting, he's hoping to catch his opponent at least at some disadvantage. But again, this is a sort of a situation where for every second Obi-Wan spends in recovery to, give himself a breather and keep fighting his defensive style, that is a second also to the advantage of Mace, who not only can recover from his aggressively offensive style, but can also, like you said, be feeling out in the Force for that shatter point. And it is, as much as I love my boy, the negotiator, Obi-Wan, he's in serious trouble here. Because as soon as he tries to move this fight, if he does it once, it's because Mace lets him. He's like, what is, okay, from Mace's perspective, okay, Kenobi has moved this fight up here. I'm going to take 2 seconds and think about it. I'm, going to pursue him. The next time he tries to make a move like that, he's very vulnerable, and I think we can just push through and get.
I think by the second time, by the time I think Obi-Wan would complete something like that a second time. And by that point, Mace has had enough time to go, okay, this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
At which point, he will allow it to happen a third time. At which point, he either just hits Obi-Wan with a force push. He either hits him with a force push, or he grabs him with a force grip.
Midair, yeah.
At which point Obi-Wan is completely defenseless. At which point it is up to Mace whether or not he just slams him on the ground and takes his weapon away from him, if he throws him straight down into the pit, if he tries to pulverize him against a wall, or and again, Mace is kind of like Obi-Wan, they're keepers of the peace. They are, people who are like, well, I'm going to do what I have to do to make sure that this fight goes on for as short a time as possible because we have other shit to do, and that's our job. By no means do either of these guys give a shit if what they're done with looks pretty. I would not be surprised if Mace catches him in a force grip if this is a fight to the death and just pulls him onto his blade.
Yeah.
At that point, Obi-Wan has any number of ways to get his shit rocked in the most brutal way possible. And again, this fight would go on for a very long time before that happened.
True.
But, and I think this would happen regardless of the terrain. In this situation, it's beneficial for Mace that once you have him in that position, you have any number of ways you can dispose of him. I think even on the most linear of places, like even Hondo's outpost,
Forum,
the outpost or Echo Base, at that point, again, Obi-Wan is going to try these evasive maneuvers, or hell, Mace will sense the shatter point and break away from Obi-Wan long enough to get him in his grip. At the end of the day, Obi-Wan cannot withstand Mace's force abilities. And the walls will come tumbling down at that point. And again, it's just a matter of whether or not Mace spares his life.
I hate to admit it, but that's absolutely correct. If Obi-Wan is lucky enough to escape with his life, it is 100% by the, at the mercy of Mace Windu.
Yeah. Because again, Obi-Wan will be flipping all over the place, and Mace will break his concentration.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
I think that's the last one, everybody. Now that you have a decent buzz at the end of the episode.
Never say never. I mean, we could. Anyway, I think
that was Spencer's way of seeing if he could dovetail that into a Pulp Fiction reference, and realized he couldn't, and immediately retreated.
I don't know. Maybe I'll think of one in the wrap-ups or something. So I think it is pretty conclusive that in a pitched fight between the negotiator, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the renowned sword master and vape-pad developer, Mace Windu, in the plasma refineries of Naboo.
Because clearly it had to happen there.
Clearly. I think we have no choice but to declare Mace Windu the victor. Again, not because of the swordsmanship of either one, but because Obi-Wan is very clearly both passively and actively outmatched in his force ability.
Yeah,
And so,
it's kind of a perfect storm for Mace. You know, you're dealing with somebody whose TK barriers are very weak against somebody whose telekinetic ability is incredibly strong. And then you factor Shatterpoint in. It's not going to be long before Mace goes, yeah, I can, there's any number of things he could do to Obi-Wan. Like, if you want to go really dark and we can just death battle this shit, we're like, you know, okay, they have to kill each other and they have no qualms with doing it in the most brutal way they could possibly imagine. Like, whenever Death Battle did Batman versus Captain America, Batman fucking hanged Cap with his grappling hook. You want to take it to that place. Like, Mace catches him with the Force. He could crush his rib cage like he did to Grievous in the Micro series. Yeah. Like, there's any number of things that he can do to Obi-Wan. He's done. Like, the second like that Shatterpoint clicks, it's Mace's fight. It's Mace's fight to lose. Like, there's no way.
Yeah. And with that, we are going to give the fight to Mace Windu. Now, there really aren't very many. We usually in the wrap-ups address some points of contention, but in this case, you know, even like we said in a linear arena like Geonosis or Hondo's Outpost or even Echo Base, a similar situation is going to happen eventually, just because Obi-Wan is very, in a swordsmanship sense, very strong defensively, but not so strong offensively, but he's exactly the opposite in his force ability. You know, very strong telekinetic offense, but, you know, defensively, it is not difficult to break through that barrier.
Especially not for somebody of Mace Windu's caliber.
No, and like Obi-Wan could hit Mace with the most fervent force push that he has ever produced, and like Mace might put up his arm as like a guard and like have a crouched defensive stance and slide across the floor a couple feet, but he's not going to be toppled over by that. And again, it merely comes down to the ability of Mace to penetrate Obi-Wan's force defenses and overwhelm him in that sense at the breaking point in the fight. Not like that kind of a breaking point, but like when the fight is broken up by movements or transitions and stuff like that.
And you know, that's the little maxim that I believe it was Darth Treya said about Sarisu. And again, even though most of these criticisms of Sarisu do not apply to Obi-Wan Kenobi, all Sarisu does is delay the inevitable. And Obi-Wan is, like, again, the longer this fight, it's weird because as soon as Obi-Wan begins to rely on his go-to tactic is the moment the fight ends, essentially. But for as long as Obi-Wan just engages Mace head on, he can... The fight will just go on forever until Obi-Wan will do the inevitable and try to get away from Mace. But the longer it goes on, the closer Mace gets to that Shatterpoint. So I don't think there's any getting around it. Should we do social media shit or the next matchup first?
Do we have a next matchup?
I was thinking the one I suggested before that I was like, I feel dirty suggesting this because me with my favorite character. Unless you have a better one. No. That's okay.
Let's do socials, and then I'll let you plug your little matchup.
I feel dirty doing it, but it's a cool matchup. Like the more I think about it, it's a really cool dynamic between these two fighters.
And like that's kind of the idea.
And there's a cool thematic element to it too.
Series is like trying to pick fights that would be very difficult to decide, not like you would never see happen on screen in canon, like intricate fighting styles that are pitted direct. Like that's the whole point. So, You can find me at SpenceMan Cosplay on Instagram and on Twitter at SpenceMan49. And you can find my pal Jared the Dark Jedi at Dark Jedi 2552 on Instagram and on Twitter. Did I get it right?
You did get it right.
You can also find the Nerd Academy podcast on Instagram. What did I say? Podmast?
Usually the Podmast. Like, you just stroked the fuck out on that one.
The Nerd Academy podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can also find us on our website and on Spotify, on the YouTube, on I don't do the plugs.
This is hilarious. I am enjoying
Apple
every second.
Podcasts.
There you go. There it is.
And do not forget to sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/the Nerd Academy podcast to help us keep the lights on, to help to help keep us bringing you more content like this.
Yes, if you're hearing this on June 1st, obviously you're already subscribed. But
yes,
I have a feeling this will be coming up before the end of June on the main podcast feed.
Yes. If you want to keep hearing stuff like this on time, shall we say, we're going to be doing our very best to crank out a Versus Series episode once a month. That does not mean that the regular Nerd Academy podcast will air these episodes that often. So if you want to stay up to date with the stuff that we are doing here for the Versus Series, by all means, all it takes is $5 a month for our Patreon to help us keep the lights on and help us keep developing more content like this. So
Yes.
Thank you all for those of you who have already subscribed, and thank you to those who will hopefully subscribe as a result of this episode. But as always, feel free to reach out to us through our Discord for those of you who are with us on Patreon if you disagree. And maybe for some of you who disagree, this could be an incentive for you to subscribe to the Patreon and give us an earful, and we'll hopefully be able to push back a little bit and have some friendly debate after the fact. So, Jared? If you would please. Oh, go
also,
ahead.
shout out to the Waffle Wizard, our $10 patron.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
And July's matchup. The legacy of Anakin Skywalker. Ahsoka Tano versus Kylo Ren. And Spencer will be covering Kylo Ren.
Well, no. I think.
I
Let me
couldn't
think
even
about
say
it.
that with a straight face. I couldn't
Let me
even say
think
that.
about it. No. Because here's what's going to happen. I could spend like every moment from now until we record the next episode doing research and like finding out as much as I can about Kylo Ren, and it will still pale in comparison to what you just off the cuff happen to know about this character. So how about I go ahead and cover Ahsoka, and I'll let you have your fun and dive headfirst into Kylo Ren, and we'll see you next month.
Yes. Well, okay, so just as a real quick aside before we wrap up, this month's Versus series is an hour and a half long. I am prepared to spend the runtime of this podcast alone on Kylo Ren's bio. Born on Chandrila.
That's not an exaggeration.
Thank you guys for listening, and we appreciate your donations so much, and may the Force be with you all, always.